Amanda, did you welcome what Gordon Brown said today in the Queen's speech?
There was a lot in the Queen's speech. There was a lot of very high level stuff. The devil will be in the detail. We've got to wait really for that to be published before we can know more about some of the implications for us.
But is that a goal? The goal of free care for the elderly in their homes, is that some goal you would have in Thurrock, or is that absolutely unobtainable?
I would be surprised if any authority could do it. In terms of the feel nationally, for a long time now, the Local Government Association, which speaks on behalf of most local authorities, has been saying that all authorities need more funding for adult social care, and we simply can't survive on what we've got at the moment. And with adult social care not being a free at the point of delivery service like the National Health Service, we do have to look at things like charges, and we do have to look at increases in council tax, because it is a statutory service and because it's a service that is demand-led. We're an authority with a high level of demand. We're also a unitary authority, which means we're responsible for an awful lot on a relatively small budget. And in terms of offering free social care for the elderly, I'm sure it's something that everybody would love to do. But in fact, over the last few years, we've seen charges rise, and we've seen every authority raising the criteria for people to actually come in and access the services in the first place.
Do you have a figure on how much it's actually costing Thurrock at the moment, and how much, if Gordon Brown's policies want to come through, how much it will cost an extra?
I think the assumption at the moment is that it will be home care, and it will be home care for over 65s in the critical bracket. We meet the need at the moment of those in the critical and substantial bracket, because we feel that is actually dangerous to draw too much of a line between the two. They're so closely aligned that you have a bigger effect on the budget by not picking up people's needs earlier, and essentially you could technically put them at risk. So in that sense, it would be difficult to see how the government's going to split out from critical and substantial in the first place. But we would estimate a cost of around about £1 million. At the moment, our budget is 4 million, £1 million of which is funded, and that's what we would have to look to find through the local authority. I think there are, again, several assumptions being made about how it might be funded. The suggestion that the Department of Health may fund some of it has been mooted already, and it's unpopular because it looks as if they will use other benefits like disability living allowance, which at the moment isn't means tested, and that could well be taken away. I would resist that. I think that's very dangerous, because a lot of people with very low level needs won't come into adult social care services, but they will get disability living allowance that helps them to stay independent. If that becomes means tested, a lot of people won't get that. And secondly, if it's absorbed, then essentially there isn't the freedom to spend it on those kind of low level needs that you might need to help you stay independent. So it's not a popular measure.
But I have an impression that you want to see a bigger debate on the whole nature of care. I understand, that because of what people say who are in their 40s, that there are huge issues that they've got to deal with now. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think the big care debate was increasingly more and more important as time's gone on, and the big care debate for people who aren't aware of it is the government green paper on how adult social care should be funded in the future. Essentially, I wonder why they went out to consultation if there were decisions already being made around how adult social care was going to be funded by the Queen's speech. We went out in good faith to people and asked for their opinions in terms of service users at the moment, but essentially what we needed to capture were the views of people from younger generations, because it will be us. In the future, there will be a lot more elderly people. When we're in that bracket, do we want care services provided the way they are at the moment? Do we want those kind of residential places, nursing places, sheltered accommodation? And actually, how do we feel that when that bubble hits, if you like, will be the best way of funding it? And essentially, that was the big care debate. So talking to service users at the moment wasn't ideal, because they're not the market that we're looking at for 10, 15 years down the line. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult to engage people in debates around adult social care. A lot of people don't know that it's a charged for service. and it's very difficult to see how it's going to affect you until you fall into it. Everybody hopes that they won't. Statistically, it's very likely that possibly two out of 3 people will end up using adult social care. You don't like to think about that when you're 30, 40, 50. But the big care debate was basically saying, you know, when you hit that point in your life, how are you going to see that funded? How do you want to see it funded?
But surely, isn't Scotland a shining example of how you can have free care for the elderly?
I've done some research on Scotland because it is something that comes up. Any change that's made to the English system was always said to be unfair because in Scotland care is perceived to be free. Personal care is free in Scotland. There are some aspects which aren't, and in fact has led to allegations really that their system is extremely complicated and people find it very difficult to navigate their way around what they can expect to get free, what they need to be charged for, how it's charged. I think the really interesting thing is that this year they're actually looking at whether they can afford to continue to do that. In terms of their budget gap, I think they were suggesting figures of around 64, 65 million pounds, and you know, possibly repealing free adult social care for over 65s in their homes in Scotland. You know, if that's the case, it's going to be extremely dangerous for us to go down that route. If the precedent says that we can't, that Scotland just can't maintain this financial burden anymore.